Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I am Mike Raine, editor-in-chief of Canadian Musician Magazine. My esteemed guest today is Andrea Morris. Andrea is the founder of AM to FM Promotions. She's been in and around the radio business for over 30 years. She's gone from being a radio personality in North Carolina to a music director in Los Angeles to a widely respected radio promoter here in Toronto. Over the course of her career, she's worked with hundreds of artists, helping them get their singles on the radio, from major label household names to emerging indie artists of almost all genres. She's especially passionate about working with those independent artists and helping boost their careers. And that's what we're really here to talk about today. So Andrea, thanks for doing this. How you been?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again. Well, not again, but speaking to me again.
well, listeners of our podcast, the Canadian Musician Podcast, may have seen a conversation I had with Andrea. When was that, Andrea? When did that come out? About a month ago?
Yeah, about a month ago. Yeah.
And it was really from that conversation I was like, oh, I should really do a webinar about this, because Andrea is so fantastic and with such a wealth of knowledge and insight and frank advice for indie artists about how the radio industry works, how the whole process of getting songs on the radio works, and what artists need to know about where they should be in their careers, what she's looking for in their music, how the pitching process works, all that. So that's what we're going to talk about. But Andrea, to, I guess, lay the foundation for this, because I really think in this streaming era that we're now in, there's a common assumption that radio is maybe less important or less influential in terms of how fans are finding music or the influence it has on an artist's career. So I guess to start us off, can you just tell me a little bit about that? Like, what is the influence of radio as it remains right now, and how important is radio to artists' careers?
Radio is still surprisingly important. I mean, I was having a conversation with a music director some weeks ago, and he was telling me that there's a study that just came out, and it said that the majority of people are still finding out about new music and new artists from radio, which I think is great. I think that it's really interesting, because you would think that, oh, you're gonna hear about things on like Spotify and on Apple Music and the like, but people still tune into the radio to get the traffic, weather, the news, and also to have like a conversation, which you don't get on streaming platforms. And it's also radio is still very relevant for when it comes to touring, because booking agents look at radio airplay, and that's also really important too. So it's still very, very relevant, much more than when I think people would think.
It's interesting. Radio is not ready for every artist. There's very finite spots on a radio program each day, and not every artist is ready for radio. One of the things that really stood out to me from our past conversation is, I think the way you put it is, you spend a lot of your time talking to new artists, dissuading them from hiring you because they're not ready for your services.
That morning, as a matter of fact, with speaking with the manager of an artist, and it was like, they're like, well, this artist is going in a completely different direction than he has in the past, and he's got this one song that he wants to go to radio. I'm like, well, this is his first song to radio. It's not going to be top 40, and if it is, then what are you going to do to follow it up? Because you don't even have a follow-up single recorded. Like, I need you to have 2 singles in the bag, ready to go, because radio wants to know, if they have those few spots that they have, that you're going to be a career artist, that you're going to somebody that's going to have another song and another song after that, not somebody that's just like that one-hit wonder. And you have to think about it. I always say to people, like, hey, is this a hobby or is it a career? If it's a hobby, really expensive hobby, and maybe you should think twice about it. But if it's a career, invest in yourself and invest in your momentum and keep going. Don't expect that your first single, the very first thing that you ever put out, is going to be number 1, because if it is, then that means that that's all you got, because you're never going to have another number 1 after that. Very few people have a number 1 as a first single and then have another successful career and keep going and going.
It touches on a few points that I want to get into, but to kind of stick on that point of when is an artist ready, and when and how they should come to you and hiring you for your services, or any other radio promoter for that matter. But what are those initial conversations like? What questions are you asking them? What are you wanting to hear back? What data are you looking at to assess, all right, does this make mutual sense for both sides of this equation between you and the artist?
First of all, here's a really helpful hint. If you're going to contact me, just don't write an email saying, "Hi, I saw you on a webinar," or "I heard your podcast. How much do you charge?" that's information that I'm sure you want to know, but it's also like, I can't tell you unless you send a link to your music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you actually, when you contact anyone in the industry, you really need to do it in a professional manner and write, send a link to your music, send a link to your website, all your social media sites, send a brief bio, because people want that encapsulated right there. I don't have time to like research everything about somebody. It's like, give me what I need to know a little bit about you, and then I can start to see what you're about and if you're ready for radio. You have to have, right now, the way the industry's changed is you really do have to have a solid following on social media. Like if you don't have an artist page on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, then you really should make one, because your personal page, you don't want that all out there for everyone. You want to present yourself as an artist different than you would present yourself personally.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to make sure that your posts are like creative and aren't just the same thing that every artist generally posts, which is like, here's me in the studio, I've got a new single coming out, order it now, it's like, do some little things, tidbits about your life, like something that's going to make people want to keep engaging with you and following you because your posts are interesting. I think that's really important. Those are the things that I look at, and I listen to the music. I'll listen to the same song over and over again to see if it sticks with me. Like when you listen to the radio, what do? You're singing along with someone. You're singing along with the song. If you don't have a recognizable hook in your song that somebody can relate to and sing along with, it's probably not going to get radio airplay. So it's like, I'm always looking at that very technically, like, when does the chorus come in? How long is the intro? How long is the song in general? Is there anything that can be cut? Is there anything that can make this tighter, that can make it a better song? And then I'll give people that feedback.
Mm-hmm. I was going to pause for a moment to tell people, as Andrea and I are talking, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. It helps if you just write like question in caps to start it off. My colleague Manis is going to be monitoring the chat and passing along those questions to Andrea and I around 2:40, 2:45-ish. So we will be getting to those questions at the end. But yeah, Andrea, to bring it back to that, in terms of, you mentioned how you're looking at social media numbers, social media engagement, what kind of posts and creativity those posts, that kind of stuff. Are you also looking at things like Spotify numbers? What are their monthly listeners, to see what kind of fan base or what kind of traction they're actually getting for their music at that moment?
Yeah. If an artist has had several singles on Spotify, I definitely look at that. I look at like the Apple Music, things like that, and sales and things like that. But it's interesting too, because a lot of the Spotify stuff is really interesting with radio too, because sometimes you'll be like, well, hey, I've got this artist and they've got like, several million hits on Spotify. And it's like, sometimes radio will come back with, yeah, well, they're all in Europe or they're all somewhere else. They're not in our area. So why does that matter? It's like sometimes the information is valuable and sometimes it's not. It's all about, I can just use and just keep hounding somebody to get the results that I want. But you really, the more information you can give to me, I can see how developed you are and if you're actually ready for radio.
Mm-hmm.
But here's
go ahead.
When you're contacting somebody, send the full song. It drives me insane when people send me just the 30-second clip, because I can't tell when the chorus comes in. I can't tell how long the song is. Your music isn't that precious.
It wouldn't occur to me that someone would only send you a 30-second clip of
a song. It happens quite often, and it's like, I can't assess your music with just 30 seconds of
it. No kidding.
Yeah. Like, if review my book, here's one chapter.
Are most of the artists, at least in terms of talking about independent artists, indie artists can mean two things. It can mean truly independent, unsigned, own all the rights, doing everything themselves, or often case when we talk about indie artists, we're talking about signed artists who are part of an indie label. When you're talking about independent artists, like, what does that mean to you? How many artists are you working with that are unsigned, truly independent artists?
That are unsigned?
Yes.
Most of mine artists are unsigned. I've got a couple with labels, but most of them are unsigned.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing if they're with a label, that changes the equation for you in terms of what your responsibility is, how much say other people are having in it.
It depends on the label. I mean, it depends
Mhm.
on how involved the label is, and like if the label has their own promo people, then they're certainly not going to hire me. But if the label, like sometimes the labels just like do what you want. You just have basically we're just there to distribute you. So
Mhm.
it all depends on the label. It depends on what your deal is with the label.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of proper expectations, what is, because expectations going into something like a radio campaign, or if you're hiring a publicist for that matter, and looking for media attention, that kind of stuff, proper realistic expectations in terms of what success looks like, and also expectations about how much work is needed on their end, what your responsibilities are, who's going to look after what. Like, what are the proper expectations going into a first time campaign with a new client?
For your first single, your very first single to radio, I think your expectations should be very low, because it's your introduction to the market, and you're basically going to grow and go from there. So I don't personally work any music unless I'm sure I can get ads on it. So you will get some ads, and you will continue to get ads more and more and more as you keep releasing singles and watch your career grow. But it's important to know that a lot of it depends on the format as well. And there's also the timing. I mean, if I put a song out, say like we put a new single out to country radio last week, and so did Dean Brody. So guess who got all the ads? But we still got ads on this artist, and like a ton of interviews. So there's a lot of progression and a lot of things that are growing that way. You just need to, it's the problem today I find is that culturally everything is just so like right now, and everybody wants to be noticed, and they want something to happen immediately, and that's not the way a career works.
Mm-hmm.
It's about growing and putting your foot in the door and continuing to grow and continuing to get better performing, and to get and to like grow your audience organically as well. I mean, COVID really didn't help with people not being able to perform live, but it also forced people to be more creative in the way that they did things. And you would see people doing web performances and like being creative, like just doing videos and things like that. And I think the people that were really serious about their careers didn't get depressed, but actually took it and went, how can I make this work for me? And I think that's what everybody, I think that's what I have to do, particularly with working with artists, because it is difficult for indie artists to get played on the radio. I'm not going to lie about that. But those victories, when it does happen, are fantastic. And they're really great. But you have to have expectations and know that your first single isn't probably going to be a hit. You're going to get airplay, but you're not, certainly if you're a top 40 artist, it's going to be really tough to get Virgin on your very first single, because that's what. So you go and you kind of like surround them. You get all the other little stations, and then you go for the bigger ones. But again, there's also the seriousness. I mean, they're like the station that everybody wants. You've got to be on par with all those other artists as well. Does your music, like like lyrically, production wise, vocally, like will it suit being played next to The Weeknd and Drake? Ask Taylor Swift, because those are all those artists that they're playing. You have to see for yourself, does that work for me? Am I at that level that I can really be heard side by side with them, and it's going to be a natural progression radio wise.
Interesting. In terms of like how much music an artist needs to have for a campaign, remembering from our previous conversation, you're not saying this isn't just a one single thing. You're looking for someone to either have an album or an EP, essentially a group of songs for a campaign. Because I remember you saying often it's the second single in a campaign is the one that you look at as the best track. You want to come back with the best song as the second song you're working in a campaign, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, like a lot, like if I do it a lot of times, like with pop music, because you want to because there's all these like these programs, like Virgin has their Future Star, the Bell Media Future Star, and there's the Stingray trending track. So if it's your second single, like the first one is kind of your introduction, the second one is the one that I like to go like, this is the one that's going to be bang, that we're going to go after that and try to get that for you. Basically so that you have your foot in the door, so they know that you're not going to just be the one artist, the artist, an indie artist that has one song and then disappears. So if it's your second song, then they know, there's a much more of a comfortability factor that they know that, okay, this is a person that actually does have more to offer.
Let's get to the process of actually your pitching to the radio programmers. Can you just kind of walk me through what that program is, or what that process is like in terms of, especially if it's a new artist, an indie artist that a radio programmer won't have heard of, the music's new to them? What is your process?
It depends on it. For me, my pitch varies with every person. It's different because some people want to hear certain things. You've got it's like knowing the programmers, and I've been talking to these people for like 18 years, more than that, because I was working for labels before then. I've been talking to these people for like ever, so I kind of know what it is that's going to stand out for them. So in addition to just my calls, we also send out a newsletter on the weekends that has like everything listed, like all the stations that have added the song to date. There's a little bio about the artist. There's the links to the social media. There's a small bio. There's a list of everything, so that people have that as a reference as well. So that they can go like, oh, okay, I can look at the artist's social media. I can look at this. I can see who's already added it. There's my comfort level there. I know what the number of spins is, what the chart position is already. And then that's already my pitch part of that, because they've already seen that. So then I've got, basically, if I'm leaving a message, I've got about 45 seconds to leave a message. So basically it's just like, here's the number of ads we got last week, or here's a little bio about the artist, just a brief thing. They've got this many hits on Spotify already. This is their first single. It's like, it's like based about this, like just something small about the song that'll get them to want to hear it.
That's interesting.
And it varies from person to person.
Okay. When you're getting pushback, essentially, like how aggressive can you be in terms of, I guess, making your arguments, I suppose you could say?
Again, a lot of that depends on the person. It's like as somebody that you have a different relationship with, you can be like, a lot more aggressive. A lot of times I like kind of dance around it and try to be politically correct. I wouldn't say politically correct, but just be like aware of not offending somebody. Whereas in like when I did tracking in the States, when I worked for labels, you could be really rude to people because Americans have a different sensibility. So it wasn't so much that you could be rude, but you could have a knockdown, drag out argument with somebody, and at the end of the day, you'd still be friends. It's a little bit different here because you can't really do that as much here unless you have like a really good personal relationship with somebody that you can go like, you're an idiot, that you can't hear that this is a good song. What the hell is your problem? But you can do it to you can do it. In the States, I would do that all the time, but it's different. And when I was a music director, I would have people yelling at me, and going like, well, what do you mean? Like, why aren't you on this? And, it's like, it's not right for our station, blah, blah, blah. And then you could have that more of that relationship. Again, I was working at a label, so that was different too, because you had bigger named artists. But when you're working with indies, it's like, you don't want to burn a bridge for somebody just based on something dumb that you said. So it's like, I'm always being very careful to be polite, but nagging in a polite way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's very reminiscent of the relationship between like journalists or media and publicists.
Yes.
In terms of, I guess, DIY radio promotion, for those artists who aren't ready for you or don't have the funds to hire you or another radio promoter, I know, speaking of publicists and talking to a lot of publicists, they'll tell me like they like when artists have been out there bootstrapping it and acting as their own publicists and doing their own media outreach and kind of building those relationships, but also getting to understand just what that process is like from the publicist end of things before they then go and hire the publicist. So for you, is there a economical, I guess, useful DIY approach to radio promotion that you would actually advise artists to be doing before they reach the next stage and go hire their own radio promoter?
No, not really. because radio is different than media, than publicity, because radio, you have to keep in mind, if you don't really know a lot about radio, a music director or program directors generally don't take calls because they're busy like managing staff, doing programming stuff. And so the music director is the one that generally takes the calls. The music director usually has an air shift. So they're doing that. They're also scheduling music. They're doing production because they still have to do voiceovers for commercials and the like. So the time in their day for them to talk to trackers is usually a couple of hours. In the 2 hours, they've got labels calling them. They've got tons of independents. The last thing they really want is an artist that doesn't know the ins and outs of the business calling them and going, I just released a song and I'm local and you should play it because I'm local. And then they don't actually have the time to and it's funny because when I talk to a lot of radio guys, they'll be like, yeah, I just say, yeah, sure. Like, I'm listening to it. I like it. It's great. Because they just want to get somebody off the phone. Like there's a finesse factor to how you talk to radio people. And the other thing is, if you want to try to do it on your own, you then have to look up every single radio station in different formats, like whatever format you're in. You have to find out what their call times are, who the person is to talk to, and this changes constantly. So I update my list at least once a week, sometimes twice, because you never know. And it's constantly like updating email addresses, updating phone numbers, updating contacts. Most artists don't have time for that. So it's different with radio tracking, trying to do it yourself, because it's harder.
When it comes to radio promotion, again, kind of comparing it to media outreach and trying to be your own, the work of publicists or trying to be your own publicist and that kind of thing. I know, like, as an editor or podcaster or whatnot, it's not just about, for us, it's not just about the music. There's a number of parts in that equation that make you think, is this person worth interviewing or doing a story about or including in another story? And it's about the broader story surrounding the artist. When it comes to radio promotion, is it just about the song, or are you also pitching the bigger story about the artist?
Well, the song has to be the main thing because that's what's being heard on the radio.
Yeah.
And if you can think about music in terms of how a programmer thinks, like, your music has to be really interesting and really strong, because what they're terrified of is that people are bored with it and they flip the channel. That's lost revenue. Like, that's like, salespeople at radio stations generally think about music as what fills the crack between ads. So, but if you can get your head wrapped around that and not be offended by it, but go like, my music needs to be good enough that people will keep listening and it's going to make things sell on the radio, that's great. You know what I mean? It's like, music is front and center, the most important thing with radio, because I even had that once when I was working at a label, and we had a video that was like top 10 on Much Music, and it was like, radio guys were like, well, we can't see the video on the radio. Which of course does make sense, but I mean, so it is about, sonically is the most important thing. And then the other stuff does come into play. Like, are you touring? Like, how many, like, are you a good interview? And I encourage people to practice that kind of thing too. Like, to try to do an interview where you're not going, no, I'm saying that kind of thing, because you need to be succinct, because everything you say should be a soundbite.
That's a skill in and of itself. So you're pitching interviews for, you're not just saying, hey, play the song. You're also trying to get your artists opportunities to do, in studio interviews or that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Media is also a copycat industry in that, once a website or podcast or magazine or whatever it is has seen that other websites and podcasts and magazines have interviewed you and seen you, quote unquote, worth covering, and makes it easier. It tends to be a bit of a snowball effect. And there is a bit of a hierarchy there, that you're not, unless you're one of those very rare artists that, like an Olivia Rodrigo or something like that, you see one or two of a year, some new artists that just burst on the scene and is on the cover of everything right away. That's exceedingly rare. Most of the times it is a process of building up your media attention. Is it the same thing in radio, where you're starting with campus radio and you're trying to work your way up a hierarchy to kind of build that snowball? and which
It depends on the music, because like some music is better suited to start out at campus radio. Some music is better to start out right at commercial radio. But it depends on the format. It depends on the artist as well. And I look at it with social media too. Like if somebody's just first starting out and they don't even have a website, it's like, get a website before I can do anything. Like, people need to be able to access that. Those are all very important tools before you even go to radio. So it's like, where are you at with your social media and with your career? If you only have like 200 followers, then it's not time to go to commercial radio. You like then we would start with the campus campaign in order to build those numbers.
How important or influential does campus radio remain?
It's very influential. It's like I know tons of people that listen to it. I always say, like, I listen to campus radio a lot when I want to hear something new and different. Because and I'm not dissing commercial radio at all. It's just like, what you like, if I want to hear something that's completely different, like alt country or like something that's like Americana music, I'm not going to hear that on commercial radio. And like Americana is one of my favorite formats. Like I love alt country, I love Americana, I love like acid jazz and things like that. It's like, I don't hear that on commercial radio, so I'll listen to campus stations for that kind of thing. And that's where campus radio, I think, is really relevant, because you get more of a variety of music and things that aren't necessarily going to get commercial radio airplay. Because yeah, AAA is a format in Canada, because there's so much music that I get sent that would be great on AAA radio, which is adult album alternative.
Well, it's adult album alternative. It's funny, I've heard the term AAA radio used a lot and kind of know what it refers to, but didn't know what the acronym, I guess the second A in the acronym, actually stood for.
Adult. And I listen to, there's a station in Pittsburgh I listen to all the time, WIP, because they're a really good AAA station, and they'll play like a really cool mix of new artists, and they like, I like that. I mean, I'm giving them a big pitch. I like that station a lot, because like they're very supportive of their local music scene. And they also they're very supportive of music in general and artists, because they're just like, hey, this week is like wear your favorite band t-shirt to work day. And I just like, like that kind of stuff is like, I like that. So, it's like, and again, they play a lot of like the alt country and stuff like that I like. So I tend to listen to them at least a couple times a week. It's my guilty pleasure.
So kind of speaking of variety on radio, it seems like it's one of those truisms, commonly assumed things these days, that it's harder to get independent artists on radio. It's harder to get kind of anything outside the norm on the radio. To an extent, I feel that's probably always been the case. But is it, in your 30 years in radio, has that changed? Has it actually become more difficult to get anything outside the norm and anything new on radio?
No, I think it's always been difficult, but I think before, there were lots of there were small market stations that were tastemakers, that like you knew that you could go to to certain stations, and they would be like, they would have like an independent show, and so you knew you could get airplay on that, or you knew that these were guys that were like, that didn't necessarily always want to play like certain label stuff, and so you knew that they would play your music. Like when I worked for a label in the States, there was a station in Cincinnati, in Dayton, and outside of Dayton, and they were like a true alternative independent station. And they once a band started getting like chart numbers and the like, they wouldn't play them anymore. Like when they got too big, they were like, we play alternative music that isn't charting, so we can't play this band anymore. And that was a cool station to work with, because they were the ones that always broke new bands.
Before we get to the Q&A portion, I kind of want to reiterate and do a quick crash course on kind of the main topic at hand, which is how do indie artists get on radio. So it's kind of, again, if you don't mind, in chronological order, sort of walk through the process of what should artists be doing, what assets should they be getting together, and what point in a album release, project release, they should start thinking about radio. So like, first off, at what point in an artist's career does this start making sense in terms of when does radio seem like a viable option?
I think
At
it
what
all
signpost?
it depends on the artist. Like some artists are growing, and their first release might not be radio friendly, but their second one will be. I think it depends on their background. It depends on, like if say you have an independent artist that's been a part of a band, they already have their foot in the door somewhat, so they're musically going to be like more ready than someone who just decided, oh, I'm going to be an artist. You have to have a website. You have to have your own artist pages on social media, and you should have like a decent amount of followers, like at least 500 before you think about radio. And you should also have some experience performing. That's really helpful as well, because like for me with country artists, I'm always pushing country artists to radio. And then there's like one of my favorite stations is up in Little Current in Manitoulin, and they have their own country festival. So if you're not performance ready, then I can't push you to them to try to be on their festival. So I look at a bunch of different things, but it's not like there's really no like, oh, every artist fits into this mold, because every artist is different and every artist is unique. So it's all about which one, what's going to grab me and how good is the song. At the end of the day, it's like, how good is the song? Like you could be a brand new artist and I'd be like, damn, this song is good, like we should push it. And sometimes I'm just like, I will fight to work with somebody because I like their music so much. Like I was speaking to an artist yesterday and I'm like, listen, you're like, she sent me demos. I've listened to her demos in the past, and the finished product is fantastic. I'm just like, I will kill to work with you because I like this so much. Yeah.
Music's subjective, obviously. You mentioned, among the genres you like is acid jazz. So there's going to be
Yeah.
a 7-minute acid jazz song that you're going to love, but you're
Exactly.
like, this won't work for radio. So like when you're assessing, oh, will this work for radio? What does that mean?
Well, if it works for radio, it's like, think about things from a programmer standpoint. You've got to get your chorus in at no later than about 40 seconds, because like if you think about the attention spans that people have nowadays, particularly like things like with TikTok and everyone's like flip really quickly, it's got to be something that's got to grab you right away. Like, you can't, I don't want someone to have like a 35-second musical intro, because that's 35 seconds that nothing's going on, that somebody could just go like, this is boring bink, Make it so that you start your song off so that it's catchy right away, so that I'm like, oh, I want to hear more of this. And like, if I'm listening to somebody's track and after the third listen, I'm singing along with it, that's a really good sign. Because those are the things that you want your song to actually have a recognizable factor to it.
Are you often asking artists to do a radio edit of their songs?
Yes, like please take out the swearing. Please, please don't say these words on the radio. Can you please edit that out? Please don't do that. And then it's like, sometimes it's like, what? With rock bands, I'll be like, take the solo out. Like this, like, we don't need a 45-second guitar solo in the middle of that. Edit it down a little bit, just like make it look, if you can sonically think about what you hear on the radio. And it's also funny to me too, when sometimes people will come to me and go like, I want to get radio airplay, but I don't listen to the radio because I hate it. Well, then you really don't know. You really don't know what's going to be expected or what's going to work if you're not sonically listening to the radio and understanding what's getting airplay, which isn't just sound like everybody else. There is room to be different, but it's just like, be good different.
Yeah. Are there regional differences? Is what
of
works,
course,
in one area of the country different from what works in another area of the country?
Yeah, I mean, you'll find like particularly within the country genre in like the prairie areas, traditional country does very well. But traditional country doesn't do well in an area like Toronto. So it all depends on, and also like certain areas like Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is a province that's very, very supportive of local artists. And they tend to like, they have like features for Saskatchewan artists and the like. Same thing with some areas of Alberta. It depends on what kind of music you have and what's going to work in certain areas. But like, yeah, like for country, traditional country does very well in those areas. But if you think about why, it's because it's very rural in a lot of the, and like Saskatchewan, and there's a lot of farmers that are out in the fields on their tractors that listen to the radio for like 10 hours at a time. And these are the guys that like more of the traditional stuff. So, and the AM stations, the AM country stations do very well there because their signal travels forever, and their listener base is much more into the traditional vibe.
Interesting. What time is it? All right, we got just a few more minutes before we get to audience questions, but kind of bring it back to that process of coming to you, starting the whole process on radio promotion. What are the other, you mentioned websites, social media presence, and that kind of stuff. Are there other assets that they got to have in hand, and other things that you're looking for to just kind of get the ball off the ground in terms of...
you need a good bio, and I'm sure that you find this with bios that you receive as well. I have, like, I can tell you, like, pretty much every bio I get from a young artist is like, so and so started singing at the age of 4, so and so was always into music at the age of 4 or 5 as a child. It's like, I'm a big believer that and I'm sure that you would feel this way. The first sentence of your bio should be something that really captures someone's attention and wants them to read more. Yes. So include something fun about yourself, or include something that's going to actually be more captivating than, this artist has always loved music. Well, duh, you wouldn't be an artist if you didn't. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think that one of the things that is my pet peeve is boring bios. And poorly written bios. You know what? It's worth the money to pay someone to write a bio for you. Because bad spelling, bad grammar, and sentences that just run on and on, like a sentence that's a paragraph, is not what I want to present to radio. So that's a key thing. I think a good bio is very important. Good photos are also really important.
Speaking of, is most of your pitching to radio by phone, by email, in person? Like, what is...
A combination of both. It's not so much in person now, thanks to COVID. It used to be, but now most of it is phone or email. Some people prefer just email only. Some people prefer the phone call. But again, like I said, we send the newsletter, and the visuals are important.
In terms of what they actually need in terms of musical assets, what are you looking for? Like MP3, WAV file? What are you needing to actually just simply pass that music on to the radio station?
Well, when to pass the music along to the radio station, I need a WAV file and an MP3 under 8 megabytes. Okay. That's because, but then it's all done. It's delivered digitally, so you have to, like, we use DMDS and Promo Jukebox to send music to radio. They'll never accept an MP3 or a WAV file that's sent by someone outside of those digital platforms.
Okay. All right, good to know.
And the reason being is, like, several radio stations in the past 2 years have gotten viruses that have shut down their entire system. So they won't. That's another thing that's difficult when you, as an artist, are trying to pitch your music to radio without a tracker, is that they might not even listen to it because they won't open files from someone they don't know. All right. And you can understand why, if the entire system has crashed due to someone opening an email, an attachment that...
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
I know, and I've seen a couple pop up in the chat here, and as I was expecting, a lot of people have questions about costs. So do we just want to hit that off right off the bat in terms of what are the ballpark figures? Campaigns, whether you want to talk about specifically what you charge, what the kind of industry standard ballpark figures is, and how it differentiates between campaigns?
I would say, for the most part, a reputable tracker, and I will say this, when I say reputable tracker, independent artist that's talking to trackers, make sure you find out that you're going to get a report every week. It's incredibly important that you get information from your tracker to show where your song's been pitched, how many spins you're getting, what stations have added it, and what they've added. I always include who they've added instead of you. Like, who did they add for CanCon, so that you can see what your competition. And also, if the playlist is frozen or they didn't add any CanCon, that's also valuable information for an artist to know. Okay, I didn't get ads this week because it's a short week and everybody froze their playlist, so that's actually really important. Ballpark figure, I would say for most formats would be about $5,000 for a single for a 3-month campaign.
Okay.
Campus radio varies, but a campus radio campaign could be anywhere between $3,000 to $4,000.
Okay.
But keep in mind, for campus, you actually need to have physical copies of the music. You need at least a 4-song EP, and you need physical copies to send to radio.
Why is that the case? Why is that different?
Have
Why
you ever
does campus still want physical?
Have you ever been to a campus station? A lot of them have very antiquated equipment.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot. You know what? I love a lot of stations. There's a lot of stations that will accept digital copies, but a lot of them still want physical copies.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Looking at,
because we go through this all the time.
And actually, just one more quick question for me, kind of going back to what you were saying about make sure you're getting reports from your radio promoter. And this also relates to something we were talking about earlier in terms of proper expectations. But what is a normal or poor or good success ratio? Again, to compare it to publicists, I know the percentage of hits they'll get on media, interviews, attention articles, whatever it is, compared to how much media they're pitching to is a very, very low percentage. For you, what is a average, good, and poor success ratio for a campaign?
It depends on the format, because with country, you expect more ads because there's more stations. And if your first campaign is at CHR radio, then you will have a lower initial amount of ads because there's less stations. So again, a lot of it depends on the format. There's country has the most stations of any format. So you'll get more ads initially on your first country release because there's more stations and there's more areas to pitch to. Like, we just started working with a new artist last week, and I think we got 25 ads on this first week.
Okay.
And that's going up against Dean Brody, and that's really good.
No kidding.
It's really good. And we also pitched him. I think he did 5 or 6 interviews this week.
Nice.
So that's fantastic. Really, really good.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
Okay. Looking at some audience questions now. Rita, just to answer your question about, she said her audio cut out. Will the audio be included on the recording that will be going out to everybody after this? Yes, it will be. Andrea, if you're hearing me, and I'm not seeing anyone saying they're not hearing me, so yes, my audio is being recorded, and so is Andrea's, and it will all be there on the recording that goes out to everyone after this. All right, let's look at one here. Hello, do you pitch for satellite radio like Siriusxm as well, or is there a different avenue for pitching to satellite? Also wondering what's the best way to pitch to CBC radio.
We do pitch to satellite, and we pitch to the Sirius stations in Canada. We don't pitch to the US ones because that's a royal pain. Yeah. And it's difficult to get airplay on the US satellite stations unless you're with a label. So we pitch to the Canadian ones, and we've had success with them there. With CBC, that's an interesting subject now, because CBC has changed the way they do a lot of their procedures. So there's a couple people that I sent. There's a couple people that are like gatekeepers, that they have to approve the music before other people can actually put it in. That has to be approved by them to go into the pile that the producers and stuff can use. So we pitch to those people, and to certain producers that we know.
Okay. Another question says, what's a song or artist that you have really loved placing?
I love working with this country artist, Doug Folkens, because Doug's a great songwriter, and his songs are just like, they're just so damn catchy, and they're so sing-alongable. And we've been working with Doug for like, I don't know how many years, and he just keeps getting more and more ads. So every single gets better and better, and that's really great. Like, we loved when we worked with Matt Mack, an Indigenous artist, who was like, we got 40 on his first single, and that was like really cool. Like, I loved working with Kelly Frazier when we worked with her, and I miss her every day because she taught me so much about the Indigenous community, and she was just a really special soul. It's like I worked with so many cool people. It's like we're loving working with like so many different artists, and it's fun when you get a call from somebody that you've worked with and you haven't heard from them in a while, and they're like, "Hey, I want to work with you again."
Yeah.
It's like that makes me happy. It makes me happy when like artists I've worked with, get like we worked with a band called Five Roses initially. We worked their first release, and they're signed to DMD now, or not, like Mike Denny's label, MDM. Yeah, Mike Denny Music, MDM. So they're signed to his label now, and like that makes us proud that we worked their first single and they went on from there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Next one, and this, I don't think this is really the case. The question is your fee ever based on a percentage of revenue generated? Based from the
No.
last answer from the last question I asked before we got to this, it doesn't sound like, but sorry, you're saying no?
No.
All right. Simple and direct. Says, do you/they use disco platform playlists?
No.
No. Okay. Is that disco? Maybe I'm missing something there. Is that just disco referring to the genre, or is that an acronym? It says, could you please tell me again, what kind of platform do you use to send music to radio?
We use DMDS, which is pretty much everyone uses DMDS, and with the Quebec stations we use and with campus radio we use Promo Jukebox.
Right.
A lot of people use Play MPE. I haven't used it yet, but right. I like Promo Jukebox, and I like DMDS. I've been using them for years. So
okay. Question for Andrea: how often do you open up opportunities to vet potential new artists? Is that kind of just an ever ongoing thing?
Every day, right. All day, every day.
Do you want to say right now, since we're on the topic, how people get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. The easiest way is to email me, Andrea at amtofm.com. You can also call. My new phone number is 905-563-4630. I just moved and I had to get a new phone number, and it's driving me insane because I have to try to remember it. But the best way is to send me an email and send a link to your music and your website and social medias so that I can kind of get a feel from that, and then we can arrange a phone call after that.
Okay. And the website is amtofmpromotions.com?
No, it's just amtofm.com.
Okay, perfect. I'm guessing your contact info is on the website.
Sure is.
All right.
There's also we also have all the artists that we're currently working with, and a list of all the artists we've worked with in the past too. So it's a good way to kind of see what we're working with now.
All right, good point.
Who we're working. Yeah.
amtofm.com.
Yeah.
Next question: how do CanCon regulations affect radio and satellite for Canadian artists? I'm guessing in terms of how it affects your pitching.
Well, I mean, 35% of what's played on the radio has to be Canadian in content. So it's great if you're a Canadian artist. If you're a Canadian artist who's gone to Nashville or LA and recorded with an American producer and co-written with an American artist, it could be bad for you because then you're not meeting the Maple standards, which is 4 parts: music, artist, producer, and lyrics. So you have to have 50% in order to qualify as CanCon. And someone's calling me now. but yeah, that's one thing I would also caution a lot of artists on. It's if you're going to go to Nashville, you're going to go to LA, or you're going to go to New York or anywhere in the States to record, make sure that you have those CanCon regulations in mind, because you as an artist are already 25% of the Maple. But if you're co-writing and 33% of your music is only yours and 33% of the lyrics are yours, then that's not going to qualify as CanCon. And you need to have that top of mind, because otherwise then what you're doing is competing with every international artist, and that's tough for an indie artist at the best of times.
Yeah, no kidding. does it make it more likely then that you'll take on clients who are CanCon eligible?
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, that's not to say we don't work international clients, because we have.
Yeah.
You know, but most of the time we pitch them to campus.
Mm-hmm.
And give them very specific information ahead of time that, like, look, this is the deal. You're an independent international artist. It's an uphill battle, and we're going to try as hard as we can, but we're not, like, it's just going to be more difficult for you.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions is, what's the dollar value of an ad to an artist? So I guess to put it another way, is there a direct correlation between you see between artists being added to radio and the revenue they're bringing in a career?
Well, I always tell artists, like a first-time artist, if you're contacting me and the first thing you ask is how much money you're going to make, I'm like, don't hire me.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's unrealistic to think that your first single is going to make you a ton of money, because it's not. Like, when you put your music on Spotify and Apple, do you think, oh, am I going to be rich from this immediately? No, you're not, because you know what their revenue, you know what their payouts are, and they're bad.
Yeah.
But you also need to understand, for radio, it's like, it's your first single. Like, what do you expect? I mean, certain stations pay more than others. I don't know how SoCan does their revenue stuff, but it's not my job to collect your royalties and make you money. My job is to get you played on the radio.
All right, perfect.
And again, you're going to make more money as you develop your career and keep going, and then you get more and more airplay.
All right. Oh, thanks to Mary Ellen here. I'm just going to say in the chat for clarifying the term disco that I was unfamiliar with in the context before. In this context, disco is apparently a file sharing platform popular with music supervisors. So I'm guessing it looks like that's specific for sync licensing for film and TV and that kind of thing, but not for radio.
Yeah, music. Yes, that's a whole completely different kettle of fish than radio.
Okay. All right. Any other questions here? Looking for your contact information we put in there. All right. If anyone has any last questions, get it in now. All right. I think that is the last of it. Sorry, apologies for my stalling here. I'm just kind of looking through, making sure I didn't miss anything. And people are wanting your phone number and email again, so I guess we'll just say that one more time slowly, so I can put it in the chat for everyone.
Sure. The email is andrea@amtofm.com.
All right.
And the phone number is 905-563-4630, or my cell is 416-527-2967. And I will be at Canadian Music Week. So if you're going to be there and you're performing, shoot me an email, let me know, I'll come out and see you. And I will be at the CMAOs next weekend too.
All right, perfect. And one last question that just popped in, and we'll wrap it up here. Is it absolutely essential that an artist has a following of 500? That kind of goes back to the data and stuff that you're looking at for new artists. Is that an essential make or break thing, or is that just one of the factors? And there are situations where it doesn't need to.
It's not necessarily make or break, but it also, a lot of it depends on the music. I mean, if the song is absolutely top-notch killer, like, oh my God, I can't stop listening to this, I'm singing along with it, sometimes you can make it work. But for the most part, I've had programmers say to me, it's not my job to create your following. It's your job to have a following so that we can build on that. So, I mean, again, everybody can give you an excuse to not do something. My job is to go, shut up and do it. Or wait, please be quiet and do it.
One more here from, since we're a few minutes shy of 3 o'clock, I'll add in any last minute ones. What's the radio potential for Afrobeat in Canada?
It depends on the song. I mean, it tends to be more of a campus thing, but it could be a really catchy song, and it could be like something that's like, oh my God, this needs to be heard. who can like say whatever, right?
Mhm. And, oh, Ricky, I just saw it. There it is. And do you find it easier to work with big market, medium market, or small market stations?
It depends. It depends on who's programming which ones. And people are there goes the phone again. People can be really cool to work with in big markets, small markets. I'm just gonna grab this. But yeah, it depends on the station. It depends on the format. Some small market stations I love because they will take a chance. Some small market stations I want to punch because they're like, oh, we need numbers. It's like, ugh. That's the thing I hate hearing is like, well, we need to see chart numbers. It's like, well, how are you going to get chart numbers if everyone's waiting for chart numbers?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what? Like, have the balls to say, this is a great track and I'm going to play it.
Yeah.
That's what I say. Because I used to be like that when I was a music director. I was like, I want to be the first one to play this. I want to be that. I want to be the one that breaks the song.
Kind of going back to one of those common assumptions or claims that you hear made about how the industry has changed. I feel like you hear all the case that like radio programmers have no independence anymore to actually put on songs that they just like and want to promote and want to champion, that everything's kind of passed down from corporate up above in terms of what has to be played. Is that really the case?
No, because like I know certain programmers at big stations that are like, no, like we're not going to follow what everyone else is doing, and we found this artist that's great, and we're going to play him. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it depends on the programmer. It depends on, I think a lot of it depends on the chain too. There are some chains that are that are like, oh no, like this is how we do it. But I think that the beauty of working with independent artists is like, the sky's your limit, and you can you can shape someone's career and like really make sure that they're having a good experience their first time out. Mm-hmm. And I love that. Like, I love working with independent artists because I just think I like the challenge. I mean, I always read, like every week, we get the ad reports and it's like, big shout out to this label for the most ads on, say, like, a new, like a new Bruce Springsteen track. It's like, well, everyone's going to play that anyway. Yeah. So what's how hard was that? It's not hard to break an artist that everyone wants to hear. It's really great when you can break an artist that no one gave a crap about. Yeah. And you can.
Last two questions here before we wrap it up. How much time should an artist leave between releasing singles from an album? Let's say 3 months question.
Well, if a radio campaign generally lasts 3 months, so you want to make sure that like you don't want to release, depending on how, it all depends on how strong the song is. Because if your song is really strong and really doing well at radio, sometimes we've done campaigns for 4 months because the song is doing really well. Then you don't want to release a new single right away because it's going to you're not going to get people still doing really well with the previous single. Yeah. So again, it's all very much single per single, not like, it's about being intuitive about how the song's performing. Mm-hmm.
And lastly, is January to March the best time to put a new song out on radio for new artists? Is that a thing, or certain parts of the year?
No, if
they're releasing music.
The only time that's not really great is like December, like say because radio shuts down for 2 weeks and over the holidays. Mm-hmm. So if you put a song out at the beginning of December, unless it's a Christmas song, don't expect a whole lot. Mm-hmm. But at any time, it's like everything has changed so much now that that it's not like no time is really a bad time.
Cool. All right, we'll leave it there. 3 o'clock on the dot. If nothing else, we're punctual. And Andrea, thank you so much for this. Everyone, thank you so much for watching and passing on questions. I hope you found it useful. And Andrea's contact information is there. Her website again, amtofm.com. That's amtofm.com. And Andrea, thanks so much for this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, Mike.
Cheers.
Look forward to seeing you at CMW.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.